So I would like to speak about Jewish or Zionist art, Israeli artists of Czech origin. Firstly, I would like to explain why I have chosen this topic. After the Velvet Revolution, so it means in the 90s in the Czech Republic, nobody knew about these artists. So it was totally unknown topic. So 10 years ago, I have been starting research about this topic, and I thought, okay, in Israel it will be better, that Israeli art historians will know more about this topic, about Czech Israeli artists. But I was very surprised because one Israeli, not Volodya, but somebody else, told me that in Israel they know only Anna Tycho or Ludwig Blum, so the most famous Czech Israeli artists. On the left side you see Anna Tycho and Ludwig Blum. And I was totally shocked because there are more than 60 Czech Israeli artists until today. So it means it's not just the topic of the past, of the history, but still new Czech Israeli artists come to Israel and they become famous Israeli painters or photographers. Who are Czech Israeli artists? It's I would say easy question, because we can call them Israeli artists with Czech origin. It's the same. So these people, these artists, they were born in the Czech lands, but in the course of life, for personal, religious or political reason, immigrated to Mandatory Palestine or after 1948 to Israel. Several of them were educated in their mother country, so it means in the Czech lands, and already participated actively in the local cultural life. The others were merely born in Czechia and only as children left for Israel, where they later received a professional training and became Israeli painters, photographers, graphics, designers, sculptors, and so on. A total of about 60 Israeli artists with Czech roots are known today. The searching for every new name and the subsequent discovery of personal data is always very difficult. There is no simple database or exhibition or catalog presenting their artworks. Sometimes we can find false information that, for example, Czech Israeli artists were born in Slovakia or even in Ukraine. On the other hand, Israeli artists of Czech origin are including among Austrian artists. The most striking example we can find in the extensive visual publication by Elisa Doer entitled in German Neuland Israelische Künstler österreichischer Herkunft, in English Newland Israeli Artists of Austrian Origin. This publication was published in Vienna in 1995. The author incorporated into her otherwise interesting book the most important Israeli artists and writers born after 1918 in Austria, as well as the person born before 1918 in the wall of Austria-Hungarian monarchy. According to Doer's conception, for example, Anna Tycho or Ludwig Blum, the most famous Czech Israeli artists, were not Czech, or, if I want to be really accurate, Moravian artists, but Austrian. She's right that during their birth, the Czech lands belonged to Austrian monarchy, but in this time there was a strong principle of national sovereignty, and we simply cannot call somebody as Austrian if he was born and spent his or her childhood in Moravia. For this reason, I have to very clearly define what I mean when I'm speaking about so-called Czech Israeli artists. I have to geographically define their place of birth, and definition is very easy. It's a territory of today's Czech Republic. Considering Israeli artists of Czech origin, we can distinguish 5 artistic generations. We usually include the artists into artistic groups based on their data of birth, but I would like to present here a little bit different approach. I decided to divide the artists according to a year of their Aliyah, immigration to Eretz Israel. The first Aliyah includes artists who immigrated to Eretz Israel in the first 2 decades of the 20th century, and we can call them as the pioneers of Israeli art. There is, for example, Anna Tycho or Ludwig Blum. The second group came to mandatory Palestine during the 30s, before the beginning of the Second World War. Between refugees running before Nazis, we can, for example, find a fashion designer Lola Ebner, painter Perez Beda Meyer, or photographer Rudy Weisenstein. Another group immigrated after the end of the Second World War. All of them were Holocaust survivors. They were both adults and children. The fourth group made Aliyah around the year 1968, when there was a short period of political liberalization in Czechoslovakia, but it finished in August 1968. These Olim Hadashim new immigrants immigrated mainly from the political reasons. The last, the fifth group, made Aliyah around the year 2000, and their artworks mainly deal with the topic of politics. The most famous is Jan Tichy. And now something more specific. I'm not speaking, of course, about all 60 artists. I have chosen just few, the most important. Anna Ticho belongs to the oldest artistic generation. She was born in Brno, in the second biggest city in the Czech historic lands and today Czech Republic. She studied in Vienna, and when she was 18, she left for Eretz Israel because her upcoming husband, ophthalmologist Abraham Ticho, settled in Jerusalem. She wrote in a letter addressed to her friend, I quote, "When I arrived in Israel, I was impressed by majestic scenery, bare hills, mighty ancient olive trees, and bizarre shapes of mountain slopes. A feeling of loneliness and eternity. I was totally overwhelmed and overcome by these emotions. I was unable to work." This is a typical diary or letter message which we can find in almost every diary. So it means they were overwhelmed by a landscape or by light. And indeed, during the first 4 years spending in Jerusalem, she didn't create any drawing or painting. She was literally paralyzed by a sudden change in the environment. Central European greenery, along with the soft light, was replaced by the sharp sunshine and the rugged desert landscape. She began painting again at the end of the First World War. During her life, she was trying almost all classical art techniques. She found the greatest interest in pencil, pen drawing, and pastel. She always wanted to achieve maximum of expressivity. The Judean hilly desert, including the holy city of Jerusalem, played the most important role in the artworks. Once she thought about Judean desert that she didn't choose it, but the desert had chosen her. Her artful view was always rich, highly personal, or even intimate. She liked to draw a stony desert with narrow paths, dry scrubby and never-ending horizon that represented the metaphor of eternal Jerusalem. Set in her own words, she sought as an artist to find a soul of the biblical landscape. A different approach to the theme of Promised Land and Jerusalem could be found by her peer and colleague Ludwig Blum, who studied just like Anna Ticho at the Academy of Fine Art in Vienna, and then he finished his studies in Prague. He immigrated to mandatory Palestine in 1923, but almost every year until the beginning of the Second World War, he returned back to Czechoslovakia and close European countries and organized selling exhibition where he offered his paintings mainly with the motive of Eretz Israel. One of these exhibitions was held in Brno, in the German House of Artists. He exhibited here over 70 paintings in a realistic style brought from Palestine. Every single picture was dealing with Israeli topic. There were numerous views of Jerusalem, narrow streets and bazaar in the old city, newly growing Tel Aviv, fishing port in Haifa, and numerous kibbutzim and moshavim. The sole exhibition was very, very successful. All paintings were sold. Ludwig Blum was a very capable and pragmatic art dealer. After a few years of business, he knew which motives European clients like and which not. They like mainly Orientalist motifs. In March 1937, for example, he finished a big-scale canvas about the size 2.5 meter and 8 meter. This is the most famous picture painted by him. During his life, he created over 10,000 pictures, and we can find them mainly in Europe, in the private collections. In the second group of Czech artists, we can find Ote Vališ. It was a graphic designer. He was born in Znojmo, and he immigrated in 1934. Before his immigration, he was running his own graphic studio in Prague. So it means he was he was a successful person. But because of Max Brod, he immigrated in 1934 to Palestine. Ote Vališ, graphic designer, cooperated mainly with Jewish National Fund and local Zionist organizations. In 1948, he graphically designed Declaration of Independence and first Israeli stamps and coins, and he prepared more than 1,000 posters. Sorry. So these graphics, these posters are from the period before his immigration. Ote Vališ's brother-in-law was Rudy Weisenstein. Rudy Weisenstein was a court photographer of the first Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion. He immigrated in 1936 and he opened a photographic studio, Photo Prior, in a busy Olympia Boulevard in Tel Aviv. He was only one officially invited photographer for the declaration ceremony of the State of Israel on Friday, 14th of May 1948. He didn't take photos only of politicians. He was interested about everything connected with the building of a new state, as well as Ludwig Blum in the 50s. He took photos of both architecture and people living in the cities, villages, kibbutzim, moshavim, and paid attention to social problems in new Israeli society too. On the other hand, we can find between over 250,000 slides the exotic photographs which have the same advertising Zionist importance as the case of the Ote Vališ posters. Here they are photos from his collection. It's Yafa, it's Tel Aviv, so romantic, exotic, orientalistic photos. Okay, and another generation. The most important member of another generation is Yehuda Bakon. He was born in Ostrava in 1929, and in the fall of 1942, at the age of 13, he was deported to the ghetto Theresienstadt. Then to Auschwitz, and in January 1945, he survived 3 days long death march. After the war, Bacon decided to become an artist. To process his experiences and to try to describe what he lived through. In 1946, he immigrated to mandatory Palestine with the help of youth Aliyah. Then he studied at Bezalel Academy in Jerusalem and he became a professor. His drawings show details and sequences of what he saw in the concentration camps and which he already made as a teenager shortly after the liberation of the camps, as well as his testimony served as evidence of in trials against Nazi criminals, including the Eichmann trial in Jerusalem, and were also used in the litigation against Holocaust denier David Irving. Since the 50s, he started painting mainly abstract artwork, searching for a way of understanding to the life, universe, and God. Comparing to previous generation of Czech Israeli artists, Bacon's pictorial view of the city and Eretz Israel is free of any visible Zionist propaganda and ideology. He has been consciously seeking to find the meaning of human existence through art. Okay, in the 60s, we have another, it's Bacon. And in the 60s, there is another generation, another area, and the most important artist is Robert Pizen. He was born in 1921 and he studies in Prague, and he was a member of artistic group called May 57. He was one of the key figures of the Czech abstract painting. In 1965 he left for Israel and he settled in art colony Einhod. He continued with philosophical cycle of paintings called Gehinnom and Spaces of Non-Existence, which he already started in Prague. These paintings were inspired by a valley of Hinnom in Jerusalem, symbolizing the hell in both Christian and Jewish tradition, as well as the biblical landscape of Eretz Israel. We can see here in this high relief painting mysterious signs and symbols. So it's something new what was happened during his Israel's period, and there is a change in the lights. So there is blue more, and it's more light. Unfortunately, Robert Pizen died very soon when he was 56, and maybe is the reason why his art is not known in today in Israel, although his artworks are highly, it's of a high quality. The last group of Czech Israeli artists consists of two young artists, photographer and multimedia artist Jan Tichy and the painter and graphic artist Jiří Tobíšek. Jan Tichy was born in Prague in 1974. He made Aliyah in 1995. He had been exhibiting internationally since 2005. He received many Young Artist Awards in Israel. Although he currently lives in the United States, he regularly takes part in Israeli exhibitions. Besides photography and video art, he also deals with so-called political art, and it means with a reflection of the relationship between art, society, and politics. Especially known are his three-dimensional paper models of Israeli nuclear power station in Dimona, or secret Israeli jail for Palestinians, or skyscrapers in Tel Aviv. These small architectural models, created only on the basis of limited information publicly accessible on the internet, are often highlighted by spotlight, sound and video recording. So as a result, they work as a separate installations. They challenge the viewer to reflect on a specific social-political problems in Israel and with information problems generally. Jan Tichy no longer celebrates the Promised Land, as was the case of the first generation of Czech Israeli artists, nor he doesn't look for answers to the meanings of life or other philosophical questions in the Israeli landscape, as it was by Yehuda Bacon or Robert Pizen. He is critically interested about Israeli social and political space. We can say that a romantic and exotic fascination with the biblical landscape has been replaced by Israeli reality full of social and political conflicts. Mythology of the landscape has been replaced by the mythology of politics. At the end, there has to be laid a few fundamental questions. Firstly, is there anything what was or still is common to Israeli artists with Czech roots? Honestly, I don't think there is something common. For example, comparing to Polish artists, Polish Israeli artists in the 50s, they created a group called the Group 10. It was a group of 10 Polish artists, and they were supporters of realistic art and moderate modernity. But Czech Israeli artists, they didn't create any group like this. And the second question, where does art of Czech Israeli artists belong? Does it belong more to Jewish or to Zionist art? There is a great problem with definition. What is a Jewish art? It's a definition problem, and is it art created only by Jewish artists, or is it art showcasing Jewish subject matters? So in this way, I would say that everybody was totally different. Czech Israeli artists, there were individualists, there were soloists, and few of them were Zionists. For example, Rudy Weisenstein or Otto Wallisch, they were very devoted as Zionists. And their art we can consider as Zionist art. And concerning Jewish art, we know, for example, portraits of Orthodox Jews by Anna Tycho or Ludwig Blum. But it's a question if we can call it as a Jewish art, because these portraits were present to their friends. So we can conclude that Czech Israeli artists were not Zionist artists, so it means there were only exceptions, but not everybody was Zionist artists. Just few of them there were Jewish artists, but all of them were Israeli artists. Thank you.